Putin. So let's bring in the chair of the House Intel Committee, also previously served on the Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman Adam Schiff, joining us from Washington, D.C. Congressman, welcome back to Sunday Morning Matters. And I want to begin with these harsh financial sanctions. It doesn't seem like they're happening fast enough to cripple Putin's military resources. Why wouldn't these sanctions happen before instead of using just threats?
Well, the problem with imposing the sanctions even before Putin has ordered troops into Ukraine is then there's little disincentive to go forward with an invasion, because then he concludes, well, I'm being sanctioned anyway, I might as well go forward with it. So I think it made sense to hold off until we saw whether he was going to do it. And when he did, I have to say, both the United States, our European allies, and others moved very quickly and gathered together in support of sanctions. Many people, myself included, thought were not possible to kick a lot of the Russian banks off the SWIFT financial system, which really isolates the Russian economy, to stop the Nord Stream pipeline, even the Swiss to use their banking system to sanction Russia. Who would have thought the Swiss banks would help in this effort? So it came together very quickly, but it did come together after the invasion.
You know, I feel like we're in economic warfare. Maybe you can clear some of that up for me, because, you know, Russia still has handcuffs on the U.S. when it comes to oil. I know Congress, along with your Republican friends, now wanting to cut off Russia's oil supply. Can U.S. oil companies keep up with the demand here in the States, especially California, where we see big gas prices skyrocketing?
You know, I think a lot of our gas and oil production is at capacity. We have been exploring, for example, with the Secretary of Energy, whether we can supply more liquefied natural gas to Ukraine, to Europe, to take some of the pressure off Europe. And I think we're pretty close to capacity. But the reason why our sanctions are taking such a bite out of the Russian economy is they are going after the ability of Russian banks to operate in the world market. We're going after the Russian sovereign wealth fund. We're going after the wealth of oligarchs and Putin himself. We can still go after, and I think we should, their oil and gas exports to the United States. There's no reason we should, in my view, be supplying Russian coffers with any U.S. resources while we're sanctioning them. That's a further step we could take, and I'd like to see us take.
Is this a wake-up call for the United States to be energy independent?
I think it is a wake-up call, not only to be energy independent, but to be to take a lot of the money out of oil and gas. You know, if we can develop renewable sources of energy, that strips Russia of a lot of its oil wealth. It strips Saudi Arabia of a lot of its oil wealth. A lot of these nations, which frankly are not doing much for the world and often doing great harm, couldn't do it without the enormous resources they get from a fossil fuel-based economy. So I think moving us away generally from that reliance essentially strips the wealth out of these autocratic regimes.
Do you think Putin is making a Nazi-like move when it comes to this invasion of democracy?
I think that he is an autocrat like the Nazis were. I think he is also obviously has territorial ambitions the way the Nazis did, but frankly the way that the Tsars did, the way that Peter the Great did. I think part of what's motivating Putin is the feeling that he wants to be another Peter the Great, that what made him great was his territorial ambition. But I think Putin has seriously miscalculated. He may have felt Ukrainians would welcome Russian troops with open arms. They're not getting open arms, and a lot of Russians are already going home in body bags. And I also think he thought that the U.S. and NATO and Europe were divided and would never get their act together on sanctions, but we did with record speed. So I think there have been some serious miscalculations on his part.
You know, Republicans say the Afghan exit of our troops opened the door for this attack for Putin, showing that Biden was weak. That's what they say. What do you say?
I think that's a completely bogus argument, as if the war in Afghanistan or our leaving it or how we left it had an influence on whether Putin would invade Russia, Putin would invade Ukraine. But I'll tell you what I think did have an influence on Putin's view about what he could get away with in Ukraine, and it was the former president, Donald Trump, and his willingness to withhold military aid from Ukraine in order to try to essentially extort President Zelensky into smearing his opponent. That told Putin the U.S. doesn't really care anything about Ukraine, that we would withhold military aid from Ukraine. And the fact that Donald Trump is calling Putin a genius even now, I think Putin believes, well, you know, America's divided. He has a lot of support in the Republican Party. And I think that has been the encouragement, not anything to do with Afghanistan.
I want to get to the State of the Union. Your Republican colleague, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, said in their response to Biden's speech, it was out of touch. He painted a rosy picture while failing to address the inflation, again, gas prices, and violent crime, the water crisis in the Central Valley. What is your response to maybe some of those things that Biden is said by the Republicans that he didn't address in the speech?
I think Kevin McCarthy must not have been paying attention, or he wrote his rebuttal before he listened to the speech. The president, in addition to obviously addressing the war in Ukraine, talked extensively about what we need to do to get our economy fully back in swing. He talked about what we need to do to conquer the pandemic, which has had such a brutal impact on our way of life, but also the economy. And he laid out the steps we need to take to put that behind us and get Americans back to work. But he also laid out what he's doing to address supply chain problems, to address inflation, the fact that he is supporting legislation we passed in the House without a single Republican vote, or that is to help America compete, bring those jobs back home, make things in America once again, or if it got a vote, maybe it got 1 or 2 votes. But those are steps that we can take to address inflation here at home. Now, inflation is a global problem, but he clearly laid out his plan to move forward in getting people back to work and making sure their dollar goes farther. So I think McCarthy just wasn't paying much attention.
Congressman Adam Schiff in Washington, D.C., thank you so much. Be well. Thank you.
Thank you.